All right, everybody. This is the SIG Architecture Conformance Sub-Project meeting for um, September 24th, 2019. And let's get going. I will pull up the agenda. 1 second here.
Quentin. Hi, Quentin.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And please put your name in the list here. And do we have John Schnucky? I do not see him. So we can bring it up anyway. So we had a situation right at the end of the cycle where a couple of tests that we had promoted had some disruptive behavior, and we wanted to run it by the group. What the decision we came up with, if you haven't updated and read that PR there, essentially is that it's necessary for conformance tests to be able to test disruptive behaviors. Otherwise, there's a whole array of functionality we're leaving, off the table, and that's not really acceptable. So the problem is that we do have an expectation, or users, there's been an expectation set where people can run these things on live clusters that potentially have production workloads. I don't think it's a great idea, but people have done it. And so we didn't want to disrupt their workloads. The solution we came up with was to allow conformance tests to be tagged disruptive, and that the default Sonobuoy configuration would skip those tests by default, and would, when you run it as part of the actual conformance program, you would need to specify that you're running it as part of the conformance program, and therefore it's going to do disruptive tests. I think in general, the people were in agreement that this is absolutely fine, but we wanted to bring it to the meeting and hear if there are any concerns or objections. So I open the floor.
Sounds great to me, but I see that Brian Grunt disagreed.
No, Brian's fine with that.
I think if there's any modifications to documentation that are required, I know that Aaron went through a while ago and made sure that disruptives was removed from all of the tests. I don't know if there's any reflection in documentation, so we should probably finish that bit and make sure that we are in line there.
So there are a couple things we have to do. Well, for the release cycle, what we did is just change Sonobuoy, but what we've sort of left it open right now. There's actually tooling in place that does not allow disruptive tests to be conformance. That tooling has to change. We need to update documentation to say that it's okay. And I think Quentin, Brian disagreed that tests, that disruptive tests cannot be conformance. That's right.
Yes, sorry, I'm reread the thread. I understand now, so he doesn't have an objection. Thank you. Sounds like a great idea. I'm surprised it wasn't always like this, but cool.
Yeah, I think it was just at some point. Yeah, I don't know why, but anyway. Okay, so it sounds like there's no objections to that. We'll move forward with that. There's documentation. All right, next item on the agenda is a hippie.
Thanks, John. I've got a few things on here. The first thing is our conformance numbers, which I'm super happy to report that from August up till August, we'd only been able to increase 3.6 points. And this last month, we've increased to 4.1 points. Some of that is due to us being really good around when we add new API endpoints, we add new tests. And some of it is due to tests, but I think as a metric that we've been looking at for a long time, to see that high of a jump in a short period makes me happy.
Yeah, if I could just say, like, actually last cycle, more than 50% of the tests added over the last, like, 6 cycles or something or more were in the last cycle. So that's due to policy changes we made, right? Saying the things that are they need to have them. So all the CRD and webhook stuff, that was a good third of those, and then just all the work that everybody's been doing in this group. So thank you, everybody.
I think we can be proud of all of our efforts to get there. And I know that we're looking at measuring this differently going forward, but we're trying to continue to see this metric. So that's just the conformance numbers, and I'll try to start each call with that information. I have other information on the endpoints, but it's on the fields, but it's not beautiful yet, and it's not easy to grok. So rather than dig deeply into that and show it, I'm going to refrain this time. But hopefully next time we get together, we'll have some nice data to guide that. One of the things we identified, going on to the next thing, the next steps for our pod deprecation, we noted that we don't have any tests for it. We wrote a test. Brian noticed that we never really used that. That's why there's no test, so it should be deprecated. I have created the ticket, but we should probably, I don't know if it's within our, I know we're the conformance group, but I would love to push this forward a bit so that we have, one of the outcomes of the work is also to reduce our surface area.
Yeah, sure. And I guess we just need to look into the process of deprecating a whole endpoint.
Yep.
I don't know if
currently it's,
or
go ahead.
Is that documented, that process, or?
I think it is. It's currently, I don't know if it's a little, it's outside of our scope. So I'm trying to figure out who do we engage? Is it the people?
Well, it's an open source project. We all have scope everywhere as long as.
Ah, yeah, that's true.
Right? I wouldn't worry about that. So just go right ahead, and I mean, if you don't have the, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. I can take a look at it, or one of us
all right.
take a look at it. But I'm just saying, don't feel constrained by.
Okay.
That.
Just out of curiosity.
If anybody has the docs for that, we'll look into. I haven't seen them yet. That'd be a little bit of a help. The next was Quentin pointing out the issue we assigned a while back on writing good conformance tests. We've got an initial PR up, but I wanted to.
Sorry, can I just go back to the previous point for a second?
Sure.
I was actually just curious whether, so this pod template thing, presumably somebody put it in, that went through review, we decided it was a good idea, and now we decide it's not a good idea anymore. Do we understand like how that process happened, and is there anything to fix in that process so we don't end up with more things going in and being pulled out later?
I think it was early days. It was like PR 178.
Okay, so they just didn't think it through.
I think it was just way early, yeah.
Okay, cool.
We have a metric ton of technical debt that's kind of like that.
Sure, I understand that. I'm just, so we have fixed the process now. We do have a review that'll prevent that failure mode from happening again, which was my main.
I mean, yes and no, right? We have caps, and if people build a cap and they start the process and they put in an API and then those people disappear in the open source community and nobody else picks it up, it could still happen. But I think that at least now with caps, there's more buy-in from a broader community. It's not just one or two people pushing something forward, hopefully.
Cool, makes sense. Thank you.
I noticed John's here. Do we want to give him a bit of floor to go back for anything over the first topic, or?
We all gave it a thumbs up.
Okay.
I had one little comment. I'm sorry I was a little late. I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page too, because a lot of links were thrown around for the documentation. And in the documentation we have for like what those tags mean, I wondered if we need to update even just what the definition of disruptive is. Because I think we were on the same page of that, like these tests that tainted a node and disrupted workloads should be marked disruptive, right? They'd even conflict with other tests. But right now, I think the definition of disruptive on that document says if it takes down a component, it is considered disruptive, like taking down a node. So I think maybe we need to just generalize that to say if it would affect like workloads not produced by that test itself, it should be marked as disruptive. Is that everybody on board?
I'm okay with that. I don't know everybody else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, I will put up a PR for that as well too. Thanks.
Cool.
We had a
Thank you.
general thing, and I hope there's a PR for it, where we had the same problem with all labels. Like it was somewhat vague what the exhaustive list of labels were and what exactly they meant. I think we plan to fix that whole thing. But if you want to take on just the disruptive ones for now, I guess it's a good start.
We do have, there's a couple other issues that are floating around currently with, I won't call them labels, they're called tags typically, whatever, it's the same thing. But there is a document that describes most of them, but we should definitely add conventions to that document to be explicit, because there's a couple of other issues that are floating around. Basically people trying to create their own mechanism. And there's a couple of problems that exist because of that. So we should be able to point to this document as the canonical source of like, here are the tags, and here's what they mean.
So do you want to, I mean, for conformance, or you're saying in general?
I think it affects conformance, but it's a general problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is so Brad put forward that proposal a few months ago to do with, I forget what they were called, but like a different class of tests. And I think
Validation suites.
I think
that's the one. And we get confusion there that they were just essentially another set of tags. You know, they're tests that just essentially logically have a set of tags associated with them that tell you what they do and who's interested in them. And we didn't have, you know, part of the problem with tags is we didn't have a good definition of what all the possible tags were that we currently support and what exactly what they mean and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, anyway, I think the only thing here is to just, do we have like a PR or rather an issue to like make that list happen? If not, we should create one.
So I think that the feature tags, so if you put feature : anything, then that's like within the domain of the person writing the test to do, as I understand it.
These are not, to be clear, these are not features necessarily. These are actually tags pertaining to a test. So it might be that the test is disruptive, or that it's, you know, some other kind of test, or whatever. It's not actually naming a feature.
So for disruptive, there's a set of tags that are valid on tests, and this, I think that's the document John was referring to. The conclusion we talked about, as I recall, in that conversation we had with Srini and Brad and you a while back, was that we would that the validation suites were more or less equivalent to the feature tags, and that we didn't want to necessarily introduce a new class of test for that we would utilize those existing mechanisms, and actually we would go through, ideally, and this has not been done yet or even noted anywhere yet, that's on me, that we would go through and tag existing tests with some feature information, with the goal being to collect data from the conformance runs around sort of factor analysis of what features are supported across, and potentially groupings of features for the purpose of eventually coming up with some sort of profiles. But that's where, as I recall, we left things.
Yep. That's exactly how I remember it, John. And we wanted to get a feel for, you know, really how many of the folks that were running conformance tests, you know, if we added those new feature sets and we got the metrics, we could then decide like, oh, everybody's running this, we might as well push this set of features into the core test into the core set anyway. And so we might reduce the need for needing a profile because we had better metrics that said, oh, we can pretty much just move this in. Or alternatively, hey, we really need a profile, right?
Yeah, and actually, I said conformance, but actually, since we don't have everything in conformance yet, that's not really. We actually would need to want to tag most of the end-to-end tests, so that we could gather information like that. But again, that's I think that's an important effort that it's not on the agenda today. I want to make sure we at least get through the agenda items, and then we can revisit it if
Yep.
we need to.
Yeah, but your memory is exactly perfect. That's exactly how I remember it. So
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. If you want to just give me an AI on that one, Hippie, the deprecating pod template, I can look into the process and figure out what needs to be done, and then we can move on since it looks
Got
like.
documentation assist from John. And is that everything for that? We'll go move on to the writing conformance tests doc. We have a PR open, and that's a link to it. And if we could look at that, I can just read it. It's super short, but basically saying our goals and requirements and our existing tests. There wasn't a lot as far as the conformance test specifics yet. We have a lot of don'ts, and those are covered in the promoting test to conformance. It doesn't necessarily, we don't have a don't do this on any test list. So I don't know if we want to have a set of avoidable practices. This is actually talking about writing good tests and trying to identify possibly best practices, as opposed to here are all of the pitfalls. Here are all the things that you might think make sense but don't. But this is our first step.
Okay, I think we should probably read that offline and see if we can have people agree.
It's 4107.
Yeah. I mean, unless there's comments that we need to discuss live, it's probably better to do that offline.
No, it was an action item from last week. I wanted to make sure that it hasn't seen any action since then, so make sure it was mentioned. Some things that we have looked at for a while, and I went out to SIG API machinery. The next part is adding the release feature gate required and deprecated fields, so taking that tribal knowledge and making it into stuff that's available via the open API for us to say whether we should use it for conformance or not. I put myself on the agenda for API machinery last week, and it was at the very end, a short amount of time to go through the things. But there was some pushback on what they were responsible for, and I don't know if my approach was not straight off, but if we could get a little more of a consensus, and is that important, and how to approach that team in a way that.
Yeah, I think that there's actually, I think we have to make it bigger than just what we're doing. Like, I think that there's value in writing in the metadata we're talking about for writing clients. I mean, some of these things may be not in every single field or metadata we want, but what I want to do is put together a kind of there's been a bunch of these efforts actually within SIG API machinery already. They've made proposals for this and for that and for the other thing, and it's just never come. Even some of them have actually been approved, but just nobody ever put the juice behind them to make them happen. And
right.
So I think that I want to kind of take a little bit of a comprehensive view of what those are and what the reasons were behind them, and then go to that team, to that SIG. And when is their meeting? You went recently, or there's another one coming?
I was last time. They meet every 2 weeks, so that was probably, I don't have off the top of my head it's going to be in like the next week.
Okay.
The next meeting. So I want to, if I could have an assist with that, that would be great.
Yeah, we can try and if it's this week, it might be pretty hard for me to make it happen.
That's fine.
Together, but maybe we can try and if their next meeting is next week, then maybe we can meet and go over some of this stuff and present it to them in a way that I hope would be. I mean, we're going to have to put juice behind it, to use the same.
Yeah, I thought about if we could get to the point where I just create the PR.
Right.
with the data in there. I just need enough guidance on that, and then maybe if the work's done and it's just a PR merge, and people are.
I think there's a lot of work in going through and annotating existing APIs. Right. There's one thing to put the infrastructure in place to be able to do it, which is already sort of
I
there.
think if the infrastructure seems there, and we have the precise list of the exact
Okay.
place like it's just following a procedure. It'll be really simple, even if it's not completely automated. I don't think there's a lot of.
Okay, that's
But
great.
they need to know how to apply that knowledge. The knowledge is there in a list form. It just needs to be.
But I want to be sure we talk about not just these 3 or 4 fields, but if there's other metadata we need or would be useful.
Sure.
And you know, some of it may go piece by piece, but yeah, okay, that's great. I think, I mean, it's not great to get pushback, but I think that's just probably
clarification, so it helps everybody.
Yeah.
There's a separate
on what we're doing.
There's a separate area around us being able to map the operation IDs in the audit logs, and them saying that's a very single use case that would impact a bunch. Like it's only useful for us, and so we looked around adding that feature gate, like an alpha feature gate that never gets promoted beyond alpha, so that on all of our CI test runs, we actually enable that alpha feature that enables the audit logging. But there was also another simpler approach suggested by Lava Lamp around using the same code that the API server uses to look up an incoming API call to the routing. And I still need to look into that.
Okay.
But that'll probably go over the next 2 weeks or so. That's that. Thank you. I want to put an AI here for John to assist. Maybe next meeting, maybe the meeting after. And the last thing for me is I'd love to get clarity on what we're doing in KubeCon. We can do a little typing here, who's coming, what are we covered in a workshop, and I don't mind picking up and creating a shared Google Doc from that going forward and interacting with the CNCF to get the right spacing and rooms and whatnot. But I think it actually, from a formal perspective, it has to come from our chairs.
There is no actual separate sub-project developer track, maintainer track meeting specifically for conformance. There's a group one for SIG architecture that's been accepted, that we already have on the books.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that the conformance working group from CNCF can't get a room set aside like we've traditionally done. And I do think we should do that. So Dan, I believe, has a meeting scheduled for tomorrow, if I recall correctly. Hold on. Give me 1 second to verify this. Damn it. You know what I need more of in my life? More tabs. I need to look it up, but I did see an email fly by not too long ago about a CNCF conformance working group meeting. So I think we can talk with Dan about getting a separate room set up for that.
Okay.
That would be
I
good.
think you might be referring to the meeting that we have. Like it was a cancellation. We had a monthly CNCF conformance working group meeting, but I think that's been canceled because of the consistent rhythm of this meeting.
Okay.
If we want to pick that back up again, it just happens that it's this meeting and then that meeting and then SIGARCH all in 1 week.
Why don't I, if you want to have a separate meeting, why don't you kick off a thread with Dan, and we can take it from there, and then CC the group.
Okay. I'll take that as an action item.
Thanks for taking notes. Happy.
So do all the things, and I think that's the other thing I thought about was doing a test writing workshop of some sort, where we go through the test writing docs and we have a hackathon basically around getting coverage up.
Contributor Summit right now. I mean, we have probably all the workshops we need. We could potentially do one. Nobody proposed it. I didn't propose it, and nobody else proposed anything like it. So, in that sense, it's this would be a last minute addition. I'd have to talk to, I happen to be doing that this cycle. So, but
I'm already booked up for that too. So I think if we want to address this in the next KubeCon cycles, we should definitely do it a little bit earlier.
yeah,
And we can get the space dedicated for this. I do think it'd be a good contributor workshop, to be honest. Like, I think it'd be great because not enough tests get written. People kind of fly by night. So I think actually having a workshop on it would be super good and fruitful.
so there will be workshops, I think I don't know for sure, but I believe in like there's multiple tracks. So there's the new contributors and there's the intermediate contributors, and then there's like the general session. And I think there should be in one of the new contributor or individual or intermediate contributor workshops on writing EDE tests, I would expect, although I haven't specifically seen that.
I haven't
And
seen it either, so.
yeah. Okay,
All right,
and
well,
so I guess the conclusion there is we're gonna look into getting space for a face-to-face meeting, almost like birds of a feather or something, and um, then for maybe the following, for Amsterdam or something, we can look into whether we want to do it in the summit, an actual workshop.
okay. Thanks for all of that. If there's no other feedback on my topics, I'll go ahead and hand the floor back to John.
Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk about is planning for the coming cycle. So I must admit that I've got a long list of AIs that some of which I was supposed to have completed by today and have not. But I want to make sure that we get on top of what that is going to look like for the next cycle. As far as I see it, I still want to move forward on the tooling cap, and that's one of those things that I was supposed to have for today, but I don't. So for me, the cap and having a well, as far as a goal for me with that is, this cycle we need to have some code, so we need to have some code there. So I would like the first phase of that to be whatever that means. First phase of that to be decided upon and delivered in this cycle. So that's my my priority. As far as other items, I think, what is the status, Hippie, of like your contract with CNCF as far as continuing test development? Like, is that something we're going to keep going on through this cycle? I think it's been valuable, but I want to know I don't know. I haven't talked to Dan about it.
If it's valuable, talk to Dan about it.
I wasn't sure if you had what the duration was or what you had.
I think we are having an impact, and we're sometimes sliding the bar between the API snoop and the writing of the test, depending on what seems valuable that week, really. But I see is once we get more and more defined on the API snoop, moving particularly my time and the teams more towards the test writing, and in that case also assisting with the automation for the PR bot for the merge blocking based on don't drop our coverage please, and the automation for whether it's BDD style, whether we do whatever YAML or Gherkin or things we do. I think the experience that we'll bring from being the folks focusing on the test all the time will be invaluable. But that's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, okay. All right. So as far as I'm concerned, that I would say then turning the crank, as I call it, it continues with a focus on. So how are we doing coverage wise on pod spec now? Do we think we?
Yeah. That's the picture I wanted to show next week. But if you want, I can go over the numbers. I'm looking at a report
Okay.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 7 fields that are either alpha, beta, or deprecated. That's empirical containers, overhead, preemption, shared policy namespace, topology, spread constraints, and runtime class and service account, which we still do use service account, by the way, even though it's deprecated in our tests. There are some pod spec fields that we could promote that have existing. It's this weird thing. I'm getting EDE hits. Like the EDE binary is actually hitting the API server. But I'm not seeing which test is hitting it. I think there's some issues with how we're recording which test is hitting the API. And it has to do, yeah, that needs a little digging into.
Okay, so we did have and I don't know if anybody on the call knows the answer to this, or we just need to look into it. Jeffrey, who's here sitting next to me, he was looking into, I think this is what you're talking about, maybe the host PID.
Yeah.
And I think
host PID, host IPC have the same issue.
Yeah, these live in they don't live in the EDE directory, they live in the node EDE directory. Right now, all the conformance tag tests live in the EDE directory. Do we know if Sonobui and if the process right now, when it runs the EDE tests, it's running them focused only on that directory, or is it running all of the across all directories with anything tagged conformance? Does anybody happen to know that offhand on the call?
So there are three separate binaries. All of the ones that are conformance should have been moved from the node suite into the main ETE suite.
Okay.
So there's 3 suites. There are 3 binaries that are produced. One is node e2e.test, one is e2e.test, and one is kubeadm e2e.test.
Okay.
And all of the conformance tests should have been moved, this happened a while ago, from the node suite into the main E2E suite that were conformance. And those are being run as part of the
okay. So then what that means is that these tests, which we'd like to promote, need to be moved from there into the main EDE.
Yes, and Aaron did a lot of this exact same work. We did an evaluation, a first pass evaluation. I don't know, it was early. I don't know if it was earlier this year or if it was last year, one or the other. My brain is like oatmeal. But we had done a first pass evaluation of the node E2E test to see which ones we could promote to conformance. We already moved those. So if there are new ones that people want to promote, we should just move them over.
Okay. All right, good. That's a practical question we need an answer to. So that's good. Thank you, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of getting back to the, yeah, I think that from a focus point of view, so we had talked about, we still have this watches one. I think that, well, I'm looking for input from others, but in my opinion, this can still be on the list, but like, frankly, right now, a lot of the things that we have in flight just need to be delivered on. So the tooling cap, I want to, as far as my priorities, and maybe it's just me, and other people can pick up stuff, so we can figure out as a group. But for me, the resolving validation suites / profiles, bringing that to conclusion, is a high priority for me in this cycle. It's a short cycle, but I think this is more just decisions being made and documented than anything else.
I think we could definitely start on a doc. I don't know if we're going to reach consensus by the end of the cycle, given the fact that like KubeCon is smack dab in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So I guarantee you that like we lose 3+ weeks just because of KubeCon alone. You're going to get people writing their talks. You have KubeCon itself, and then you have like all the other after effects that you typically have, follow-ups from KubeCon proper.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess maybe they're not going to all get in this cycle, but these are sort of my priorities. These are the things I see us as needing to finish over the next, 2 cycles, I guess. And the sooner the better. there was another topic that came up earlier, similar topic. This one, yeah, well, I guess that fits in with the tool. That's okay. Any other things that people believe should be on our priority list as a group?
I would like to up the number of reviewers so that people aren't bandwidth constrained by people who are overburdened today.
Yeah.
And you and I and Aaron's been gone for a while, and we're totally backlog blocked from time to time on Clayton and Brian to get the final approval. But I think we need to free that up and broaden the pool. And
so I'm able to give the final approval now, but not on the things I review, right? I wouldn't want to do it on the things I review. So it doesn't help as much as one would hope in that sense. But yeah, how do we do that, Tim? I mean, we have this group here, and a lot of these folks are writing them. I mean, we could be maybe the same folks here that are writing them need to pitch it and start reviewing other folks. I don't know that I'm not sure how we're going to bring in. Well, I guess one thing we could do, we need to interface with the SIGs right now around, or very soon with the tooling piece around getting these behaviors defined. I think we should probably go to each SIG and also choose somebody who can help review the particular tests in their SIG for the conformance. Go ahead.
I think we definitely need to do like a roadshow style thing where we kind of squat on different SIGs and ask them, be like, hey, have you looked at your conformance profiles to date? And hey, have you, because it really should be up to them to manage their APIs that they built, right? Because sometimes on some of them, I have to technically defer, the final decision to them too, and it's kind of blocked by them. So anything that's obvious and pretty straightforward, so long as the criteria are met, is okay for me to, LGT and promote. But like some of the other ones that are slightly ambiguous, you change the behavior of this end-to-end test suite. I know there was a couple of them. I have to go back and talk with them and verify.
Yeah. So as part of this, I think there was a few tests that we needed input from Node, and somebody from that group, I would have to go back and look at who it was, did sort of volunteer to be the point person for conformance on Node related things. So if we can do, like you said, go to the roadshow with the SIG, talk about it, and see if we can get each SIG to assign somebody, then they can be going through that board and doing reviews of their pieces.
Maybe I can take an action item to start the conversation with the SIG leads mailing list.
Okay.
And I can start something. Maybe I want to wordsmith and not be too harsh. Maybe I'll have a doc and pass it around with this group first, because I'm a little bit surly and old now in this project, so that it might come across the wrong way. Because we want to enlist their help, not shame them, and I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing for the community there.
We call that the St. Pleasant filter.
Yeah, and I think then longer term, then this really definitely becomes something we want to do in the contributor summit for Amsterdam. That how to write the test, but also how to review the test, and I mean they're obviously closely related, and that trying to broaden that pool.
I think it might be useful when we're in San Diego to have a rough and tumble version of that, so we can some of the logistics and things before we do it in a more structured way.
Well, one of the contributor summit things that is I want to talk about the prod readiness stuff, which is another SIG Arch thing, and I can broaden that a little bit into like alpha beta GA criteria and this can at least be brought up, if not, much time spent on it. So at least it's some visibility.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Any other priorities for the next 3 to 6 months? Any other topics for the agenda? Okay, well, we have all our action items defined here. And I guess I can give everybody back 20 minutes unless there's last breaking items.
All good. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you all.